All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I am very excited but also very sad to be talking about the final episodes of Andor. The series came to a close last night in the best and most perfect way possible. Andor is a show that when I first talked about it on the podcast back in 2021 or 2022, I was not excited about the prospect of following Cassian for an entire show. I didn't see the necessity in it. I thought his story was well fleshed out in Rogue One, and the mystery of how he as a character got to that point in Rogue One was part of his mystique. And then as we got closer, the first trailer dropped for Andor, and if you go back and listen to that episode where I talk about this being one of the best trailers that Star Wars has ever dropped, I said that there's something different about this show. Something special is here. Not just the production value, but you felt that there was a grounded nature to the show. You felt like there was something new and fresh that they were going to bring to the Star Wars galaxy. And 4 years later, here we are, and we have witnessed the best, most consistent piece of Star Wars possibly ever, or since the original trilogy. I can't put into words how much I love the existence of this show, from the messaging and themes, from the characters, from the beautiful dialogue, the set design, and of course, the fantastic music. Andor is a gift, and it's something we will be talking about for the next 50 years of Star Wars. And I again just want to say thank you so much to the creatives behind the show, to anyone that worked on this show. It has meant more than you could possibly know to us as Star Wars fans. You absolutely made it worth it. I put this up on my Instagram, but as the credits began to roll for the final episode of the series, I sat there taking it all in. And then as the name started coming up, I was just filled with this overwhelming emotion that just came out in tears as the music played. And I just thought back on all of the characters we had come to know and love, the journey, the struggle, everything that we witnessed, all coming to a perfect conclusion, and how all of those characters interacted and influenced one another. It felt like a triumphant moment of something that I wasn't even a part of. I haven't been overcome with emotion like that from a piece of media in a couple of years, and it's something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. I have no doubt about it. Now that I've gotten all the sentimental stuff out of the way, let's talk about the arc itself, because this was my favorite arc of the second season, without a doubt. I know a lot of people will be surprised by that. A lot of people will say the Gorman Massacre was their favorite part of this arc, and I can't disagree with that. I think it probably is the strongest portion of this season, but there was something about these last 3 episodes that landed so hard with me. It felt like season 1 of Andor, which I always refer to because I thought season 1 was a perfect season of television where every action had a equal and opposite reaction for all the characters. It all flowed together so nicely. And I felt this last arc had that same thing. There wasn't the 1 year time skip in between. There wasn't a lot of jumping around. It was very focused. We saw new sides to characters that we had been with since the first season, like Luthen and Kleya. We had the urgency of the Death Star on the horizon and the Empire scrambling to try to contain their ultimate secret. And every single character gets a perfect send-off and conclusion to their story. And even though this series has been very dark and we've seen so much suffering and loss, every single heroic character gets a hopeful ending, while every villainous character gets a bad ending. And that is the beauty of Star Wars. It's that little bit of hope in a sea of darkness. And Tony Gilroy and the writing team understood that, and they did it in such a beautiful and subtle way here, where it's not beating you over the head, but you just organically see our characters come to their rational conclusions, and it just completely fits with the theme of Star Wars, and it fills you with that hope, and you know that Rogue One, again, while it is dark and we know that a lot of our characters don't make it out, we know it's worth it, and we know it ultimately results in the galaxy defeating the Empire. Episode 10 is easily my favorite episode of the season, focusing on Luthen and Kleya and how their relationship came to be. It completely recontextualizes their partnership from two people devoted to the cause and the rebellion to a father-daughter relationship, which was so beautiful and unexpected and allows you to go back to season 1 and rewatch it through a whole different lens. You see that the care that they have for each other isn't just out of necessity, it's out of love. The Andor writers had planted a seed earlier in this season when Kleya and Luthen both leave the gallery after pulling off the stunt to get the bug out of the antique. And they have this very lighthearted and jokey moment. And again, I really love that moment, but now I see it completely different. I saw it in the moment there as two people who have been in the mud together for so long building this rebellion, and they have this one moment of reprieve from the stress and anxiety of their everyday life of running the rebellion. Now I see it as a father and daughter surviving in the galaxy together. This episode and the arc as a whole was a great return to form for Andor, getting back to circular storytelling where pieces of dialogue or imagery was brought back around later in these episodes to call back to earlier moments. And one related to Luthen and Kleya's relationship is when the episode starts, we have this incredible scene where they both realize that Lonnie is in trouble. He's calling them, and they're both ready to go out and figure out the problem. And Kleya's like, don't go in if you don't think it's perfect. And Luthen says, I think we've run out of perfect. And you see the acknowledgement in both of their eyes that this might be their last moment together before things go south. And Luthen gives her a smile and he says, move. And in that moment, we don't really understand that piece of dialogue, move. We're just like, is he simply telling her to get out of the way, or is he giving her an order? Let's get going. But he says it with such sincerity that you feel like there's something behind it. And later on in the episode, as we have these flashbacks to when Kleya was a little girl and she was found by Luthen and they start living together, living on the road, we have this explosive scene between them where Kleya sees this firing line and she gets angry and she wants to do something right away. And Luthen's like, no, store it, build it up until I tell you to move. And then he walks away and says, move. It's so powerful when you can have these moments planted early on and then these payoffs later to understand what that moment meant earlier. And this arc does it a couple times, but most importantly, it's done here with Kleya and Luthen. Kleya does kind of give Leia vibes, which is really funny. I don't know if it was intentional or not. But anyway, I love those little pieces of nuance in writing. Before I talk about Lonnie, I just want to continue this line of circular storytelling and the scene where Deidre comes to Luthen's antique shop finally. You know, this was the safe haven for the past 2 seasons. And to see the enemy at the door, knocking on the door, and hearing that sound that Luthen would always hear and he would be expecting people, this was the first time where he was taken off guard. And my jaw was on the floor. I was like, oh my gosh, Deidre is here. The jig is finally up. So there's 2 great pieces of imagery here. One is with the knife that he shows her, and one is the Starpath unit from the first season, the first arc, the thing that got Andor involved in the rebellion, calling back to that seminal moment in Luthen's life, but also Cassian's life. And Deidre's like, oh, it's rusted, it's worn out, it's maybe gone past its lifetime or its usability. She's not talking about the Starpath, she's obviously talking about Luthen himself. He finally slipped up and got caught. The other piece of imagery is the knife that he shows her. She's like, what's fake in here? Is there anything fake in here? And he shows her the knife. He's like, we don't know about this one. This felt to me like an acknowledgement that we don't know who the real Luthen is. We know his commitment to the rebellion is real, and we know by the end of this episode that his love for Kleya was real. Everything else, it was hard to distinguish, and I thought that was just a cool little nod with a piece of the antique shop. And to add a bit more dramatic irony, that potentially fake knife is the knife that he uses to kill himself or try to kill himself before Deidre can take him in and get information on not only the Death Star, but the entire network of the rebellion. Again, a shocking moment and something I was not expecting this late into Andor. I really thought these last 3 episodes were going to be somewhat of a victory lap, but there was still so much more excitement and intrigue and shock that the Andor writers could inject into the show. It was fantastic. Also, seeing Dedra and Luthen exchanging blows, with Luthen obviously having the upper hand on her, was peak writing. It was peak dialogue. She said, "You disgust me." And he goes, "The rebellion's not here anymore. They're gone. They've flown away. They're everywhere now. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you." Beautiful. Just chef's kiss. Before I move on any further with the Kleya and Luthen storyline, I want to jump back to the first scene with Lonnie, who as a character has been such a small portion of the show, but his impact and influence and his sacrifice cannot be understated. He is the whole reason the rebellion was tipped off about the Death Star. And the conversation between him and Luthen is so tense. You know the weight and the gravity of this information and the urgency that Lonnie needs to tell other people about this, because if he gets captured or dies, the information dies with him and the rebellion will never know until it's too late. In the end, Lonnie gives up the information to Luthen, we cut away, and then when we come back to this park bench, he's dead. We know that Luthen killed him, making sure that there was no loose ends, that they couldn't trace this information, or that it would slow them down at least a bit or enough for them to get the information to the rebellion. It's such a beautifully morally gray situation where Lonnie tells Luthen about his wife, about his child, and that they want safe passage. And we've known about this for so long. When he goes to Luthen and Luthen gives his speech, he talks about his family and how he wants to keep them safe. And Luthen was full of empty promises. Luthen completely used this man. But in the end, did the end justify the means? That's the moral question. And it's something that Luthen is very aware of. I'm forced to use the tools of my enemies against them. It's a shocking moment. Lonnie ends up being the hero that Luthen needed, but Lonnie will never be known by anyone in the galaxy, and the sacrifice he made will never be known. He'll always be known as one of Luthen's informants. His name won't be remembered. He died with no legacy, but his sacrifice allowed the rebellion to eventually beat the Empire. And that's just the microcosm of the show. Beautifully tragic. So jumping back, Luthen conveyed that information to Kleya, and then he has his face-off with Dedra, and now he's being transported to the hospital, and Kleya shows up and sees that he's being taken by the ISB. And here's another great example of training your audience. Tony and the entire writing crew have trained us as fans of Andor to think critically, to understand who these characters are, what they're willing to do, and we're able to piece together, without any dialogue, without her having to say anything, we know in that moment that she has to go kill Luthen to make sure that they don't get information out of him. From there, we have this incredible progression where Kleya now has to kill her long-term partner, someone who she's worked with for years building this rebellion, someone she's followed for so long, and the irony is that her final mission for that person is to kill that person to protect the rebellion. And the Andor writing crew doesn't stop there. Over the episode, we learn that their relationship is so much more than what we thought it was. We see that Luthen saved her from a war-torn planet. She was an orphan. And over time, they build this father-daughter relationship. So now that mission to save the rebellion and prevent the ISB from getting information from Luthen is now a daughter forced to kill her father for the good of the galaxy. It's stunning. It's absolutely incredible. And the way they sequence this whole episode is perfection. It really is my favorite episode of Season 2 and one of my favorite episodes of the series. I'm already dreading the gut punch that I'll feel when I rewatch this episode, but like many other Andor episodes, the more you watch them, the better they get, the more things you pick up on. And I have no doubt that when I rewatch this episode, I'm going to get so much more out of it. But simply on first viewing, the one flashback I want to touch on is the one where they are on this planet. I think it looks like Naboo. I'm not sure if it is. But they're overlooking a bridge where there's Imperial stationed in tanks, and Luthen hands her the detonator and says, if you're in, you have to do this, and it has to be your choice. I can't make you do it. And she's really eager to do it. And you see that Luthen, to a degree, regrets having her involved. I don't think he wants to bring her into this mess. But if she is going to commit to it, it has to be on her terms. And Luthen ends up doing it and tells her not to look immediately, but to look after. And we see that same moment come back around where she has to hit the trigger in the present to blow up some vehicles on the hangar platform so that the floor empties out so that she can go forward and kill Luthen. That same urgency that she had when she was a kid is gone here because she knows what she has to do after she presses this button. But she goes through it anyway. It's the incredible resolve that we see from this character throughout this season. It's so engrossing, and it makes me love Kleya as a character, especially a character that in season 1 didn't have much. I mean, she was there as a backstop for Luthen to keep him in check, to keep him in line, but now she's just so much more. And that line about choices that Luthen has in that flashback resonates throughout the entire show, and there's been such a great emphasis on people's choices, good and bad, and what their repercussions are. So we finally get to the scene where she's in the room with him and she unplugs the machine that's keeping him alive. We see his final breath. She holds it together as much as she can, but before she leaves, she gives him a kiss on the forehead after he's passed. And that moment just got me, and I think it'll hit me even harder when I watch this episode again. And the episode ends with a fade to black of Luthen's body, a character that has been so integral to the story, but I feel this final arc was really his. We see the legacy of Luthen, everything that he's built, everything that has gotten him to that point, and everything the rebellion will do is because of him. And there's been a rocky road to get there. We've seen him clash with our heroes. We've seen him do terrible things to our heroes in the name of the rebellion. But in the end, they all respect and appreciate what he did do and his sacrifice. And the moment, I'm skipping ahead, but the moment where Cassian goes off on all of the heads of the rebellion at that moment about how they've sacrificed nothing in comparison to Luthen, it was so cathartic. And we see that Cassian has made peace with this very complicated relationship that he had with someone who, to a degree, saved his life, but to another degree was ready to have him killed by the end of season 1. It's very interesting, very complex, and very engaging for an audience. I just talked about that episode for 20 minutes, and I have no shame. I do not regret it. I absolutely love episode 10, but I am now going to move on to episode 11, which was a great episode for Dedra specifically. Dedra, again, a character that this season felt a little disjointed, to be completely honest, I think, between where we saw her in season 1 and the first couple arcs of this season going into the Gorman Massacre, and her morality kind of kicking in and her not feeling as comfortable with going through with the murder of civilians as we probably thought she would be, because we've seen her do terrible things in the name of the Empire. But as I've sat with it, the more I've talked to people, the more I understand where Tony and the team are coming from, the more I've come to appreciate it, and maybe in a rewatch of season 2, I'll get it more. But I really needed this final wrap-up for her character to be great, because she's been a fantastic and unique addition to the lexicon of Star Wars villains that we've gotten over the years. And here we see that Dedra's ambition that made us root for her in season 1 is the same ambition that brought her down in the end. She overstepped. She wanted all the glory. She was arrogant to go to Luthen face to face without backup. She wanted to gloat. She wanted to rub it in his face that she finally found him. And in the end, that arrogance cost her greatly. And over these next 2 episodes, she is completely broken down. We see this incredible scene with her and Krennic of him circling her like a shark in water, a huge parallel to the first season where she did the same thing to Cyril. And you kind of see that hierarchy start to come into play, that the Empire eats itself one after another. Even her old assistant is the one to turn her in at the hospital. And even though Dedra has done terrible things in the name of the Empire, and we know that if she continued to rise the ranks of the Empire, that she would be allocated more power and that she would potentially do even worse things over time, we can't help but feel bad for her. In these scenes where she's manhandled by Cyril, she once again is manhandled by Krennic, we see that scared little girl again. And in the final episode where she is shown to be in Narkina 5 and the lights turn off and she jumps and she starts weeping into her own hands, you see that child that was never loved. You see that child that was trying to prove herself to everyone around her for acceptance and approval. You understand by the end of this arc that everything she's done, all of her ambition, is simply there to earn her approval by people around her because she never got it from her own parents who abandoned her when she was a child. And you can't help but feel bad for a character like that, even though they've done terrible things. It's fantastic. It's exactly the type of send-off I wanted for a complex character like this. It hits so hard. And the fact that she's at Narkina 5 and we know what goes on there makes me feel even worse. She even got her little Hannibal Lecter moment where she's in the cell giving her assistant advice on how to catch Andor. That was a cool parallel to cinematic history. Other aspects of this episode, we finally get to see K2 and Cassian back together again. K2 and Alan Tudyk's performance are just as good as they were in Rogue One. And Cassian gets a signal from Wilmon that there's a urgent message coming from Luthen on Coruscant. And Cassian has made peace, obviously, with Luthen, and he wants to save him. He wants to go right away. He ignores all protocol, and he takes a ship with Melshi, and they go to Coruscant to find Luthen at the safe house. Of course, when they get there, they find out that it's just Kleya and that Luthen has died. I really like the isolation that this show has conveyed throughout the season. It started with the Gorman Massacre, where we have that final transmission of Wilman's love interest being like, please, we need help, we're being murdered, please, someone help, and you know that no one's coming. You kind of get that same feeling when Kleya is on Coruscant sending out these messages, kind of going crazy in the safe house by herself. She's like, is anyone going to come and save me? Am I just sending this to no one? But she doesn't give up, and Cassian and Melshi show up to save her. The ISB triangulate the location. There's a big shootout in the hallway. K2 has this horrifying scene where he's just bludgeoning and using people as human shields, and he saves the day, and they are able to escape and get Kleya out of there, and they head back to Yavin. The last scene I want to discuss from this episode is with my boy, General Partagas, who is in his ISB meeting room, his classic ISB meeting room, to talk to Krennic and Dedra's assistant about finding the leak. And this was another piece of that circular writing I'm talking about, where they need to have an excuse as to why they're trying to find this particular woman in Kleya. And Partagas is like, just say that she has an infectious disease and that everyone needs to stay away from her and they need to contact us if they find her. And Partagas, in his first scene in the first season, he talks about how the ISB are there to cure diseases. They're there to stop the spread of viruses like the rebellion and keep the Empire safe. And this theme of diseases and the spread of the rebellion is central to his character and his ultimate demise in the last episode. And I think it's so funny that, again, his suggestion here is related to diseases. And the even funnier thing is that there's a blink and you miss it line in, I forget if it's this episode or the next episode, but the fact that they put out this disease order is the reason that stops them from getting to Cassian and the crew. Like, it's funny that it just falls in on itself. But yeah, Krennic and Partagas kind of give each other a cautious nod as they leave each other, where they both know that they could potentially be in very big trouble if this goes south. Krennic is the leader of the project, and this leak would show incompetence from him. And then obviously Partagas, the leak came from the ISB, the people who are there to prevent leaks. So they know both of their heads are on the chopping block, and they just nod to each other and say, good luck. Since I'm talking about it, I'll just jump into the finale, the final episode, where Partagas is alone in the ISB meeting room that he made famous, listening to Nemec's message of all things, and he's emotional. He cannot fathom how the rebellion is spreading. How is this working? It just does not compute inside his mind. And the ISB come and they say, we need to take you away now. And he's like, can I please collect my thoughts? And you know in this moment that he's going to off himself. And he does. We don't see it. We just hear the blaster shot, and the ISB officer who was sent to arrest him just puts his hand up to the stormtroopers, tells them to hold off. There's nothing to worry about. And he nods his head in mourning. You can tell that he lost a mentor, someone he looked up to, and there's a moment of sorrow there. So R.I.P. to Partagas, a character, again, that I didn't think would get this focused of a send-off, but as I'll talk about in my final remarks for this entire series, no character was wasted, and every character got a fitting send-off. I think my favorite aspect of this final episode, outside of the emotional weight of having all of these character stories tied up and seeing them have these reflective final conversations, is the legacy of Luthen. You feel the monumental weight of this character that did not exist before this show. A character that fundamentally changed the Star Wars galaxy from the shadows. He built this network of spies. He was bold enough to lash out against the Empire in smart, methodical ways. He outplayed this gargantuan enemy that had galaxy-spanning resources right under their noses the entire time. And after all of that, he was still scrutinized. He didn't die a hero. He died a hero to very few amount of people, and the rest of the galaxy will never know his name or his face, but their freedom they owe to him. He did good things, he did terrible things in the name of the rebellion, something that Cassian openly acknowledges to the other heads of the rebellion. I knew Luthen, the good and the bad side of him. He was a necessary evil, and his prediction of the end of his life and his legacy was laid to bear last season when he gives his speech and says, I will not see the sunrise that I'm fighting for, but I continue to move forward regardless. And there is some comfort in the end, again, that little nugget of hope that Star Wars should have. He did have love throughout from Kleya, and he will be remembered by Cassian, by Vel, by Mon Mothma, by Wilman. It's really beautiful, and that scene where Kleya steps out of the tree hut and she sees what the rebellion has become. She finally sees it face to face. She was stuck on Coruscant this whole time, and she never truly saw the fruits of her labor. She only heard about them. So it's really an impactful moment. I would love to get a book that focuses on Kleya growing up and her and Luthen starting the fledgling rebellion on Coruscant. Hopefully Claudia Gray would write it, because Claudia Gray is the best Star Wars author out there, my personal favorite, and she admitted that her favorite Star Wars since the original trilogy is Andor. So I think that's a match made in heaven, or a Mon Mothma book focusing on her arranged marriage when she was a child, her in the Senate with Padme, and then growing up and being a mentor to Leia. That would also be a great Claudia Gray book. Other things from this episode, I mean, we really see, again, the bureaucracy of the rebellion and how hard it is to organize something like this on this wide of a scale. We have Bail kind of at the head, but Mon Mothma checking him when she can. The other heads of the rebellion are very skeptical, and you can understand where they're coming from, but us as an audience are on Cassian's side. We're so mad because we're like, we know what Luthen did, and we're like, why would he lie about something like this? And we get the last laugh because, of course, in Rogue One and then in A New Hope, we see the fruits of Luthen's labor. But other than that, we get a lot of falling action, a lot of characters having very reflective conversations on the journey that we've been on. We see Mon and Vel having a heart-to-heart discussing Luthen and if this is true or not. And what I love is that Mon Mothma does finally end up in a place where she has a loved one that respects her and loves her back with Vel. And I love that final shot where she's eating lunch with all the soldiers and Vel in her iconic white robes, and you just see that she has this community now that she never had before, and that's really subtle and really beautiful for her. We see Vel and Cassian discuss Aldani and all the people that died along the way, Cinta, Luthen, Nemec. They ironically leave out Skeen, who I guess Vel finally understood his betrayal after the heist. And yeah, it felt really good. As I said, we get the Deidre in Narkina 5 scene, which was so sad. We see Melshi is all in on the rebellion. He's leading the troops through the forest. And we get this, iconic final montage of Cassian walking in his Rogue One gear in slow-mo through the Yavin base, making eye contact with all of these people that he affected their lives and they affected his life in one way or another. And it's just that acknowledgement of the journey, It's fantastic. The music's great. And he boards that ship, and now he's off to the beginning of Rogue One, which is going to hit like a freight train now. I have been waiting 4 years for this rewatch of Rogue One, and I'm so ready for it now. And just to top it all off, Tony and team had to put in this scene with Bix and her new baby, who of course is Cassian's. This child will never meet their father, which again will make Rogue One even worse to watch. And she looks off into the sunset, similar to what Cassian did when he lost his mother. He looks off into the sunset. Another parallel of this shot is the Death Star shooting Scarif at the end when Cassian dies. It kind of resembles a sunset that he's looking out at. And it was just a really mean way to end the series. I am a little curious why she would go back to a planet where her best friend died and she was almost assaulted by a Imperial official. I feel like that place would have some darkness to it that she wouldn't want to go back to, but I get the sentiment. I get the imagery. It looked really good on film, so I'll let it slide. And that brings us to the credits where the music started to play, and I started bawling my eyes out. I was overcome with emotion about this journey that I just went on with all these characters, all that was sacrificed, all the love that was gained during this journey, and of course just the ride for us as fans and for myself as a fan, seeing Star Wars become something I always wanted it to be. I always wanted a show that was in the vein of something in prestige television, like something on HBO. And in a lot of ways, it surpasses some of the best that we've seen on HBO over the years and other prestige television. And I have no doubt that it's going to have a lot of awards buzz at the end of the year. But regardless if it wins or not, Andor is the new standard. Andor is what every Star Wars project should strive to be. It doesn't have to tonally match Andor. It doesn't have to deal with these dark subject matters like Andor. But the love, care, and writing that goes into this show should be something that is required for these other Star Wars projects. And Star Wars fans, that's all they want. And that's why Andor has resonated with so many people, because of the care that is put into it and the lack of care that we've seen in other Star Wars projects. So again, I want to thank all of you for listening to these episodes. I want to thank the entire Andor cast, crew, and writer's room for creating such a beautiful piece of art. I wish I was really good at editing, or I was really good at drawing or painting, because I would love to contribute something to Andor, but all I can do is create these episodes and give you my thoughts and maybe help you appreciate some aspects of Andor that you didn't at the moment, or you just wanted to hear someone else talk about Andor. I thank you so much for listening, whether this is the first episode you're listening to me cover Andor, or you were here back in 2022 for season 1 when I was covering week to week. It's been a ride. I will definitely be talking about Andor more in the future. This show will never leave my mind, and you can expect me to be dropping an episode after I rewatch Rogue One with a whole new perspective. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment below what you thought of Andor, your favorite aspects of Andor, what you're going to miss most about it. Follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. If you're listening to this on audio, please leave a review, hit the notification bell, do all the things. Remember, make it worth it. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.